Hi everybody, my name is Chef Rachel. I am excited to show you a little bit of truffle making here. So you have a kit that has a lot of different really cool ingredients that you can use to make your own chocolate truffles. So I'm going to just give you some examples and walk you through it. So what I have here is a little bit of chocolate. So you're going to see the bags of chocolate chips. And from there, you're also going to have your carton of heavy cream. So I brought this up just to a boil, turn it off, and then you're going to pour it over your chocolate chips. See how I'm kind of moving it around there so that it gets completely covered. And I kind of swish it just to make sure that I have all those chocolate chips submerged, because what's now going to happen is I'm going to let this sit for about a minute. And from here, the chocolate is going to start to melt from the heat of the heavy cream. If you go in and you start to stir it right away, you'll oftentimes have little bits of chocolate chips that are not completely melted, and sometimes it doesn't completely mix it in. You have some fat separation. So here's a little fun word for you. It's called emulsion. So it's trying to get the mixture really nice and evenly combined. Like if you think of like a vinaigrette, how those like to separate. Well, chocolate ganaches, that's what we're making here today. It likes to separate too if you don't mix it properly. So we want to let it start to initially melt that chocolate. Again, about a minute. You can even go up to 2 minutes if you want to. And then I'm going to go in with my whisk. So I like a whisk. I also like a immersion blender. If you'd like that, you could use a food processor. You can use a spatula, but I do find that if you go in with a spatula, sometimes you do get that fat separation. So what you're going to see now is I'm just kind of going in and I'm just kind of loosely mixing a little bit into the center. And now it's going to start to ribbon out and start to look kind of fudgy. You kind of see that there. So I'm going to continue to mix, starting to get even more combined. And now it's getting completely incorporated, that cream and that chocolate. I'm making sure there's no lumps in there. What's also nice with the whisk is when it adds the air, not only does it help with that emulsion, but it also helps to kind of thicken it. So it takes a little bit a little bit shorter time for it to start to set up and for it to start to harden and be ready to then scoop for your truffles later. So you can see here that really nice, even, kind of looks like a nice rich fudge sauce. So that looks really good. So I'm going to take this out. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to portion this out into a few different containers here. So you have a lot of options. You are provided with instant espresso powder and orange peel. Oranges. So then you can use the orange peel to flavor these. So I have just 3 little containers. So what I'm going to do is go in and portion out so that I have some of each flavor. So I'm going to do some plain. I'm going to do some orange and then some espresso. So if you've never had the combination of dark chocolate and orange, it's so lovely. I think people don't necessarily think of that combination, but it's fantastic. So that's personally my favorite one. So I have that separated out. So then from here, we can flavor. So I'm going to keep this one plain. I'm going to put that off to the side. And then this one, I have a little bit of that espresso powder here. And so I'm just going to go in, sprinkle a little bit here. And I'm not adding the whole container. You can. You don't have to though. So with this, I'm going to go in and we're going to mix this in and add to taste is what it's called. And so when you're adding to taste, you're going to literally just taste it, see how strong the flavor is and how you like that. Kind of hits you a little bit at the end, but I want it to be a little bit more forthcoming right when you start to eat it. So I just went in with a little more sprinkle. And the thing is I don't want to give you an exact amount that you want to add, because depending on if you take the ingredients that you have in your box and you decide that you want to make all espresso, then you might add the whole packet. If you decide that you just want to make a few espresso ones, so you maybe have half of the amount of the chocolate ganache in here than I do, you're going to need less. And if you love espresso coming through, maybe you're going to add more. In my case, I just want it to kind of be a little bit to hit your palate and not overwhelming. So that one I'm going to call it on. And then we're going to do some orange peel. So what I have is a microplane. And so with this, I'm just going to go through and start to zest my orange. If you don't have one of these microplanes, you can use a box grater that has a fine, finer side on it. You don't want to go too large. You'll see these smaller pieces here, and that's kind of what we're looking for. And the same thing that we just talked about with the espresso, I'm doing with your orange peel. So I'm adding just a little bit to taste, stirring that up. And then just as before, fresh spoon. Same thing, I want to go in with a little bit more. So it's hitting you at the end, but I want that flavor to come through just a little bit stronger here. So I'm just going and zesting. In total, I've almost zested the whole orange. Getting that mixed in. And then that one is going to be good to go as well. So what I would recommend then from this point on is you have your different flavors that you may have done. And I would label these. So I like to go in with a little bit of plastic wrap. And push it onto the surface of your ganache like so. And then I have a Sharpie, and what I'm going to write on here is just a P for plain. So I have that labeled, and then I would do that with each of my truffles, each of my ganache containers, so that I know which one's which when I go in to pull it out to shape later. Another thing you could use is I do have a tablespoon of butter here. If you wanted to go in and after you whisk in that heavy cream, you can add that butter. About a half a tablespoon to a cup of chocolate chips, 4 ounces of heavy cream. And then what that does is it gives it just a kind of richer, smoother mouthfeel, a little bit different flavor because you're adding a little bit of additional fat to it. And so it does kind of change the way the flavors come through, but the mouthfeel is what really changes. So it's kind of silky. So that's an option if you do have butter on you and you just want to go in and add just, again, about a half a tablespoon for that 8 ounces rough cup of chocolate chips. So you can do that. But then my next part is if I'm really planning in advance, I could make my ganache and I have it prepped out here ready to go, and I can leave it covered on my counter overnight because you got to give this a lot of time to start to set up, to start to harden so that you can scoop it. But in the case if you want to make it more immediate, like 2 hours later or so, then I would take these covered containers and I would stick them in the refrigerator for like 2-3 hours, and it starts to set up. So then you're going to be able to go in and scoop them and you'll be able to round them out. Another kind of option, another little cheat I want to show you here is I'm going to take, so this one's my orange, I'm going to set that to the side. I'm going to take my espresso one, and I just have a clean sheet pan here, and I'm going to pour this out. And I want to show you something else that you could do if you want to work with it immediately. So I'm going to pour it out onto that sheet pan, and I'm going to spread it out. It's called tabling. And so I'm going to spread this across. And what's happening is when I am spreading it and adding basically a lot more surface area to this, it cools and sets up a lot faster. And so then I'll go back in, kind of scrape it up, spread it back out. And this will be ready to scoop in about less than 5 minutes versus having to wait for the refrigeration of your ganache or overnight on the counter of your ganache. And again, any one of these does work. When you do this tabling idea that I'm showing you right now, again, it sets up faster, but it also will have a little bit of a firmer set. So it's not going to be quite as creamy as the ones that you just allow to crystallize and set up on their own. Just a few different tips for you. So then once they're ready, we're going to go in and shape them and garnish them. We're going to finish them with additional flavors. Okay, so at this point, my ganache has been in the refrigerator for about 2.5 hours, and it's already started to set up really nicely for me. So you could see how well set, crystallized is what we like to call it in the chocolate world. And so what you want to do is basically let this go long enough so that it has gotten enough set to it. It's hard enough so that if I go in and scoop, it's not just going to be liquidating anymore. So I'm just using a little small cookie scoop. I have a few options here. You can see the difference. These are pretty large, this side, and then this one's the smallest one that I have. And so it's about a teaspoon worth of ganache. If you wanted to just make it easy though, you could use 2 spoons and then just pick out what you would like, just if you were kind of going to do cookie dough. So I have my scoop here. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to round it out. Notice I put some gloves on. When you have the gloves on, it'll keep your hands obviously nice and clean because you're working with the chocolate. What I also prepared here is a sheet pan, and on there I labeled plain, orange, and espresso or coffee. And so then I'm going to just get these lined up because especially if you're doing multiples, you want to remember which ones are which. So what you can also do to make the process a little bit more streamlined, and this is a nice activity to do with other people, is you can go in and have someone be the scooper, someone be the rounder, however you want to do it. So that's what I'm just starting to do here. Is I'm just going to go in and get a bunch scooped, and I have those on a tray ready to go. And then I'll show you another quick example is I'm just rounding it out between my hands here. So I'm left with something kind of like this, and then I'm going to set it on my pan. So from here, you want to make sure that these have a little bit of time to reset. And so if you wanted to pop these in the refrigerator for like 5 minutes just so they kind of firm back up, you definitely can. However, you don't want it to be in there too long because it'll start to form like a crust on it. That's actually the reason why we covered with the plastic wrap flush to the surface of the ganache, because you don't want the crust to form because then you get little bits in there. And so when we let this sit too long, like in the refrigerator, if you were to do that, then your coatings aren't going to necessarily stick. So I just want to get these shaped, and I would do this process all at one time. So I would shape all your plain and then maybe clean off your scoop, go in, then scoop and round out your espresso ones and then your orange ones, or whatever flavors that you had decided to do. Get them all scooped and all rounded out, and then I would go in and garnish those after. So then I will show you that part next here. So at this point, I let my truffles just start to set up a little bit. So again, you can leave them on the counter if you want to. I would go like 10 minutes or so, just so they start to kind of harden a little bit more. It's a little bit easier to handle because you have all the warmth in your hands as you're working with them. So when you're rolling them, making sure that you're going as quickly as possible and light pressure. So I'm not sitting there constantly rolling it. Otherwise, you're just going to melt and it's just going to stick together. So have the person with colder hands in your house. They're going to be the ones that are going to round these out for you. But then at this point, again, starting to set up. Freezer for 2 minutes, refrigerator for 5-10 minutes, on your counter for 10 minutes or so. Something just to give them a little bit of time. Then you have all your finishing ingredients. So what we're going to roll them in. So you do have cocoa powder, raspberry powder. There is a Heath bar that you get to chop up into just super small pieces. And then already done for you is the peppermint candy pieces here. So there's lots of ways that you can finish these, and that's why on my pan now I have them lined up and rounded out, my plain, my orange, and my coffee. And so from here, I'm going to just choose how I want to finish these. So I wanted to label them because I don't necessarily, for my taste preferences, I don't necessarily want to mix like the coffee with the peppermint. That's just for me. But you could definitely do that. It's all up to you. It's all your preference. It's your tastes. So I'm going to start by going in with a plain, pick this up here, just going to toss it, and you can kind of roll it through. And then I have somewhere just to the side where I'm going to set those finished really pretty truffles. So I'll do then another plain in the toffee pieces. And with the toffee, you can go into a food processor with it. I would just cut it into a few pieces first, or you can cut it by hand. That's what I did. And then here's my toffee truffle. And then I like to have just a towel on hand when I'm doing this because it does get to be a little messy. But then what would be really nice with the toffee as well, with the Heath bar, is going to be the espresso one. So I'm going to go in with one of my espressos to there as well. And then let's do an orange just with regular cocoa powder. So I want to show you now what you do when you use the powders. I'm going to put that in there. And you know what? I'm going to do 2 at a time. So I'm coated in my cocoa powder. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to lift it up. And I don't know about you, but when I go into any sort of dessert that has a lot of cocoa powder as part of it, like raw, you know, not cooked into it, I don't like a ton of that just, you know, when I'm biting into my dish. So I like to go in with just a little sieve, and you can kind of dust off that excess. Then pick that off, and then I have my cocoa powder coated truffle. So I'll do that with my other one. And then those ones are finished. So then let's switch it up, and I'm going to show you the raspberry powder, but it's going to be the exact same idea. So let's just do a plain one in the raspberry. And if you notice too, the reason I'm swishing it around in the cup versus me moving it is because, again, they are soft. So I don't want to do anything that's going to start to soften them more. And again, the warmth of my hands. So as little actual handling as possible is going to be helpful for these so they hold up. And this does not have as much excess as that cocoa powder tends to, but you can absolutely go in and do the sifter technique and dust it off. But here's the raspberry truffle. So there's so many really pretty, fun different ways that you can put these together. The options are truly endless. You know what you want to do with these. We just have some examples here for you of ways to finish them. But it's like I said, endless opportunities here. You can also go in, if you ever decide you want to make chocolate truffles again, you can go in and use milk chocolate or white chocolate, but then you do want to cut your heavy cream down. So I like to go in at least half if I'm doing milk chocolate or if I'm doing white chocolate, because it just helps to help it to be a little bit firmer than if I'm going in with that full quantity. Do a few more peppermints just so we have a really nice plethora of options to show you. And then I have my finished products. So I just have them all lined up here ready to go. But it's, like I said, so cool, all the different flavor combinations that you can do. From here, once they are finished, once they're garnished is what I'm calling them, once they're coated, from there you do want to let these then hold in the refrigerator if you're not going to eat them right away. So up to about 2 weeks if you keep them covered. So whether they're on the pan like I have here, or whether you have them in a Tupperware of some sort, you need to just make sure that they are covered and sealed. But then I would definitely recommend, so if you do have them stored in the refrigerator, pull them out and let them come to room temperature before you eat them. It's going to be the best texture, and then the more flavor it's going to have coming through when it's at room temperature. You don't taste that flavor not coming through quite as strong when it's cold or too hot on both sides, like both extremes there. So when I go in at room temperature, it's just going to be that burst of flavor, and again, that really nice creamy, beautifully smooth texture. All right, so here is the finished product. So you see all the really beautiful truffles. It's such a pretty presentation. So I hope you really enjoy your truffles. Have fun with it. Be creative. Do whatever you want to do with yours. Again, you have so many options for you. You really have fun. Play with it. Make it your own. Hope you have a great night.